talking about the summer reading assignment that we did. The summer reading assignment encompassed chapters 1 through 4, and historically, it brought us from ancient Native Americans that occupied our continent long before any European settlers arrived, and it covered the colonial period up to the colonies declaring their what? Their independence in 1776. We're going to pick up with chapter 5 this week and next week. Again, you have a reading assignment due for Friday of this week, page 205 to 255. It's on the material we're starting to cover now. We're going to pick up with the events that occur after the colonies declared their independence. But before we get into it, there's material that we're going to need to know. Again, Regents Prep, there's material that we're going to need to know and be comfortable with, even though we're not covering it in class during a lecture or during a lesson. Who can tell me what led the 13 colonies, the 13 American colonies, which were very diverse and different in terms of geography, in terms of way of life, in terms of culture. Who can tell me why the 13 colonies decided in 1776 that they had to part, they had to separate from Great Britain, the most powerful military planet, most powerful nation on the planet? Why did the colonies in 1776 opt to declare their independence? Palin.
In hopes to do better for themselves, to take over more land and set up a better position.
Certainly the colonists wanted to do better. They wanted to improve their way of life. Absolutely. Add to that, Shane. Yeah, harsh rule, extreme taxes. The taxes that were being imposed on the colonies were taxes that were being assessed without the colonies having what?
Say.
What type of say?
They didn't get to choose who made the votes and who led them.
The colonies did not have a vote in the English Parliament. The colonies did not elect, because they lived 3,000 miles away from England, the colonies did not have, if you lived in Massachusetts, if you lived in New York, if you lived in any of the 13 colonies, okay, you did not have a vote in who represented the colonies in Parliament. So therefore, the colonies claimed, and I would say accurately, no taxation without what? Representation. To put it frankly, the colonies were pissed that they were being forced to pay an exorbitant tax. And not only that, the tax, colonists were used to paying taxes. The 13 colonies were used to paying taxes before England taxed them and would lead to their independence. But the colonies' taxes were being paid, generally speaking, to their local government, their state and local government. The colonies were now being assessed a bunch of new taxes, hint, hint, new taxes that were instituted for what purpose? This was a point that was made in the reading. Not the colonies were pissed off about taxes in general, but Lizzie, what about the taxes angers the colonies? Unfair in what way? A lot of colonists were successful. A lot of colonists were hardworking. We call them middle class today, and they had a successful way of life. So ability to pay generally was determined by property ownership. If you owned property, you had to pay taxes to your local colony. Taxes being paid to England, though, were expected to be paid by everyone. And yes, a lot of people had difficulty paying, but that's not the biggest. That's not the biggest motivation. What was the original question?
Why weren't they
Why were they pissed off?
Why were the colonies so angry?
new taxes?
It was a new tax, but for what purpose? Why were those new taxes? Why was the tax on tea? Why was the tax on lead? Why was the tax on paint all assessed?
Because the British put them in control. That's why, because they paid for
What war?
French and Indian War.
Absolutely correct, Anna and Dylan. The colonies were being taxed with a series of new taxes and new duties, D-U-T-I-E-S, another word for taxes. They were being taxed, newly taxed, to pay for the French and Indian War, which was fought in the 1750s and 60s. And the American colonists were part of Great Britain in 1754 when the French and Indian War started. The American colonists were part of England. Matter of fact, they were English citizens. But we know that war is very what? Costly. And when Britain and the French and Indian War ends in 1763, Britain was deeply, deeply, deeply in what? Debt for funding a war 3,000 miles away, and the colonies, hundreds of thousands of colonists living in North America, English citizens, loyal citizens of the crown. Britain says to them, hey guys, we just spent 9 years defending you in North America from Native American attacks. We defended you from French soldiers stationed in the Ohio River Valley. England feels that as loyal citizens, they should be expected to what? Pay taxes. And the 13 colonies largely reject that notion and say, we do not have representation in government, therefore we should not pay. This leads to the Declaration of Independence. And we're going to transition right now to basically the following. The Declaration of Independence is the colonies declaring that they are a free and they are a sovereign nation, free, separate from England. That's their declaration. Made what year? July 4th of what year, Alyssa? 1776, okay? July 4th, 1776, the colonies officially declare their independence. Haley, does that mean that they were free? Well, they declared their independence. They still have to what? Well, they're expected to pay taxes. Why is the Declaration of Independence really not meaningful? What's, Shane, is going on that makes it difficult for them to just say, hey, we want, is England going to allow them to walk scot-free?
No.
What's England, what's going on, Shane, that's going to prevent it?
Well, at that point, it's simply just still a declaration. They haven't done anything to, yet at the time to
To
push
what?
them out. Tell them that we're not doing this anymore, and they haven't fought the war.
Yeah, what has to happen for the colonies' independence to really mean anything? They can declare it all they want. I can say the sky is green. Does that make it true? What has to happen, Palin, for the colonies to really become independent? Not just declare. The war's been going on for almost a year when the Declaration is established. The war, remember, starts at Lexington and Concord in 1775. The war's been going on a year, but for the Declaration to mean anything, the colonies have to what? They've got to win the war. If the colonies don't win the war, the Declaration of Independence, which props to Mrs. Carey, all right? She gave me a copy. I'm going to post it here shortly. If the colonies don't win the war that's ongoing, their independence is basically a sheet of paper with some nice words on it, but those words will not have a lot of what? Value or meaning. So the colonies have to win the war in order for the Declaration of Independence to really mean anything. I can state, I'm George Washington and or Thomas Paine, who encouraged independence in 1776. What was the name of his document that was very, very important?
Common sense.
Thank you, Common Sense. Thomas Paine encouraged the colonies to declare their independence, but even Thomas Paine knew you can declare independence until you're blue in the face, but is England going to bow down and say, oh, well, the colonies declared their independence, I guess we're going to let them go? Why do the colonies exist?
Because of
England has the colonies as a possession so they can make money on the products, the raw materials, the land. England's not going to just let the colonies traipse off into the sunset. England is going to force them to win the war. Now, with that as kind of a background, we have learned in the last 20 minutes, we have gone from the ancient Native American period, thousands of years ago in upstate, it wasn't New York, but this area where the Iroquois and Algonquin, we've gone from that period of time to the start of the revolution, and we've done it in about 20 minutes. So our class this year, our class this semester is going to basically pick up at the revolution and take us through June to modern times. So where there's, and I want to stress this because this is important, take note on this, mental note, you don't have to write this down, but most of the information to help you get ready for your Regents exam will be taught and learned from here forward. But there are some key ideas that you're going to have to be familiar with from the period of time that we just talked about, the time between Native Americans and the Revolution beginning, and that's primarily the motivations for the colonies declaring their independence. Okay, Britain, who used the word harsh? A moment ago, somebody said Britain's treatment of the colonies was harsh. Before, did you use that? That would be correct. You're correct. Britain looked at the colonies as their 13 children. And 13 children, good children, don't disobey their mother or father. 13 children are expected to what? To listen and be good servants to mom and dad. And you're going to need to know that one of the motivations for declaring independence was the harsh leadership, of colonists yearning to become more free and wanting to escape from the rule of a monarchy. Monarchy, in other words, it's a synonym for what? Monarchy would be a symbol for what type of ruler? A king. Okay? A king. So we're going to pick up with the revolution today, and that's going to be our starting point. And the revolution starts on chapter 5. And typically what I do at the start of each chapter, I have a PowerPoint and a copy of the outline for the PowerPoint and the lesson. I'm going to give everybody a copy of each, so you have it. Melissa, if you could pass those down, please. Okay. And Haley, coming at you. Shane, you got one? Okay. And this outline is basically a sheet that kind of highlights the major topics that we're going to be learning about and reading about. Okay? Same deal. Pass those down. Keep coming at you. All right. I've got a couple of things to kind of talk about. Our textbook is by a professor named David Sheep, SHI. Everybody's textbook, this is the copy that we're going to be using. And chapter 5, our PowerPoint. Most classes will involve some degree of lecture where you're basically following along in your PowerPoints. Okay? And they're interspersed with video clips, and we'll do some Q&A. I might fire a question at you related to a topic. I also normally will, how many of you have used Edpuzzle in any of your other classes? Okay, I assign, once we get going, not this week, maybe not even next week, but starting middle of the month, I'll start assigning video clips related to content we're covering in class. That will appear on your stream, and you can watch them at home, and usually there's going to be a pop-up question or two that will appear at the end of the video that you can respond to. So I want to spend the balance of class today. We won't get too deep into it because we only got about 6 minutes left, but I want to spend the balance of class today talking about the beginning of the revolution. And what I'd like to do is take a look at page 2 of your packets. And page 2 is going to address the focus questions that we're going to see. Now, if you look back at page 1, it gives the inclusive dates of the revolution, 1775 to 1783. Most of the fighting will end by 1781, but it takes until 1783 for what treaty to be signed to officially end the war? Treaty of Paris, 1783. So that's why we see an 8-year gap. Let's take a look at the focus questions. Again, these are basically things we're going to be learning about in this particular lesson. And the focus questions will begin each of your slideshows as we do our lecture. We've got, in what ways did the American Revolution function as a civil war? I want to hop on that question right now. The American Revolution has been called a civil war. A civil war is what, Shane?
Where a country goes to war against.
Yeah. A civil war, by its very definition, is a war involving people from their own country fighting against one another. It's not capitalized in this instance because we're talking about generic civil war, but if it was the American Civil War, 1861 to 65, we'd see it capitalized. In what ways does the Revolution, Katie, exist as a civil war? What do you think?
England technically like has control over the 13 colonies, so it's kind of like England's fighting itself at this point.
England and the American colonists. American colonists identified as English citizens. Even when the war was going on, there was pride in being a citizen of England. Now, eventually, that pride is going to wane, but most American colonists identified as English because they were. They had relatives in England. They represented English culture. American colonists were English, and for that reason, Shane and Katie are right. The American Revolution is a civil war because you've got English from England fighting against English from America. Civil war. And there's plenty of examples you're going to see in your reading. Brother fought against brother on both sides. Father fought against son. It was indeed a civil war. Second thing we'll talk about. What challenges does the British Army and American military leaders face in the Revolutionary War? A little factoid. When the war starts, the British were the strongest army and the strongest navy on earth, bar none. So you're going to find this pretty remarkable that a group of American militia, citizen soldiers, and an American professional army that is newly formed by George Washington, when they win the war in 1783, they had defeated the strongest military on the planet. Not because they were better equipped, not because they were better trained. Why? What do you think? I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball here. Dylan, why? What makes it remarkable that the Americans could have defeated Britain? What facts made defeat for Great Britain, I don't want to say inevitable, but more likely to lose the war, even if they were a stronger military?
Well, the Americans were they kind of had like home field advantage, like they knew like everywhere they were fighting, and that they were fighting for their freedom. English was just fighting to keep them there.
Americans were fighting on their home turf. They knew the geography, and Dylan also pointed out that the Americans were fighting to defend their territory. Okay, what do you say, Palin?
Because the British also didn't have their help while they were fighting the war, like previous times, and kind of like without their help, they kind of were weaker anyways. So they kind of like set the Americans up for success, kind of going ways out. But they said they knew it any better.
Okay. If you're a British soldier, a redcoat, what would some of the challenges you think would be, especially given that your mother country is how far away from where you're fighting? About 3,000 miles separated by an ocean. What would some of the, if you're a British soldier in America fighting in Boston, what would your worries be day to day as a soldier? Alyssa, what would your worries be as a soldier? Supplies, and how you get them. You have to ship supplies from 3,000 miles away across an ocean to feed and to house and to clothe an army that's literally dozens of thousands of men. That is not easy to do. It's very cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Yeah? Meaning what? It's expensive. And eventually Great Britain, even though they were a stronger military, because the Americans were pesky, because they were fighting tough, because they were using guerrilla tactics, but most importantly, because war was expensive, Great Britain said, you know what? It's just not worth it. So that coupled with the fact that the Americans were fighting way over their heads, the Americans were doing a hell of a job as citizen soldiers and as a new army, but also you have to throw in the fact that the British, it's expensive as hell fighting a war from 1,000 miles away, okay? So we'll talk about that. How was the revolutionary, what were some of the key turning points in the revolution? How did it change the war's direction? One of those turning points happened literally a stone's throw from where we're sitting right now. Saratoga, okay? Battle of Saratoga, 1777, turning point in the war because the colonists win. They defeat the British Army with the help of colonial militia, and it's after the Battle of Saratoga that who signs on as our ally? France becomes America's official ally. We'll pause on that, and we'll pick up tomorrow. Hey, I think did you take care of register for?
She was on.
She was.
I was the only one that was.
Okay, all right, so you're good, Palin. I got your inquisitives.
Yeah.
Study, in case you walked in late, study your vocab, chapters 1 through 4, quiz on Friday.
Also, are actual tests and tests, are those on the reading or just, are the actual tests just the vocab?
The quizzes are on just the vocab.
And then what about like tests, like
You'll see.
multiple choice?
You'll see.
Okay.
You'll see.
I didn't know if they were like
You're
the
not
same
gonna-
thing or not.
You will get multiple choice. Good night, Dylan. You will get multiple choice, but they're going to be at the end of each chapter, and they're going to be. I'll guide you through those.
Also, do we have to do the inquisitive for the reading
For
or no?
chapter 5,
Yeah.
yes, and it's due the 13th. Next Friday, not this Friday. but
Okay,
next
so
Friday.
just have the reading done by
By
Friday.
Friday's class.
Okay.
You good, Haley?
Yeah.
All right, thank you, girls.
Bye.